they'd sell the scrap metal. So they had started a grass fire out the gate, and they sent out an M1 tank to go back and forth and try and, blow up, try to put out the grass fire, rolling back and forth. Not really a great thing for a 60-ton vehicle to do. This vehicle came too close to the ditch, and it went in the ditch, the drainage ditch. There's farmland around there. And the barrel got stuck, and it couldn't turn. And one of the things about an M1 is that the driver's hatch is directly below the turret, so that when the barrel is straight forward, the driver's hatch can't be open. So the barrel's in the mud, he can't open the hatch, and the water starts coming in. There's a little compartment between the turret and the driver's where you can pass things through, and they put a hose to him, but the water kept on rising. A lot of the crew left because the fire had kind of come around the M1, and eventually it got to where the water was above the level of the hose, and there was a tug of war trying to keep the hose out of the water. And by the time the recovery vehicle came, the driver had drowned. So, the different elements that made that horrible was the fact that it was a very slow death, and the guy was asking, "You're not going to let me die here?" And nobody thinks going to the desert that somebody's going to drown to death. It's unexpected. There were different elements of it. I know you were talking a little bit about the difference between psychiatry here and combat psychiatry. One of the biggest difference, when I evaluate a patient here, I'm looking at them. Are they a danger to themselves? How can I help them? In my military role, a lot of times I'm also looking at the unit. It gives me kind of a dual thing, because like smoking is unhealthy. So if you were asking me how many cigarettes you should smoke, I'd probably say 0. That'd be my civilian thing. Combat is unhealthy. So how much combat should a guy have? None, right? Well, I can't say that for everybody, because then there wouldn't be an army to fight the war, So a lot of times it's a subjective thing of trying to figure out if this guy was behind me, or is this guy, would I be watching him more than for the enemy, is good enough. And that's it's kind of hard, because that it's not post-traumatic stress you're dealing with, it's like pre-traumatic stress. A lot of guys freak out before they go into combat, or it's too early to have taken it at the final form, and you don't know, just because a guy's doing lousy at 24 hours, whether he'll be just fine a year from now or have permanent problems. It's not that easy to tell. There's some surreal periods. This little picture, I don't know how the pictures are looking. This picture, we were just heading down to meet the 3rd ACR, and we were told the bridge ahead was out, so we were expecting to be ambushed, and we were getting under our vehicles and getting ready to shoot. And all of a sudden these school kids come walking by with their books. And school was the first day of school since the war had started, so they were checking us out, and we're checking them out, and it was just bizarre, Another pretty bad cluster was a debriefing where I had multiple parties involved. This started as a sandstorm in Fallujah, and what had happened was in the sandstorm, a vehicle came out, and politics were such in the early war, a lot of the supplies and stuff was coming from Syria, from the west, because at first you got to remember, it's a Shiite majority with Saddam and a Sunni minority keeping them down. So at first the ones that are waving the American flags are the Shiites, because they've been beat up, put down. The Kurds, the ones that weren't in power were put down, and the Sunnis were not liking us, right? So aid from the Sunnis was coming from west, from Syria and over the border. So this vehicle comes up to a checkpoint that's manned by a M1 tank, and they didn't see. Normally they drive away, not see, but they didn't see the checkpoint, so they were on it before they saw it, and you know, it worked. They caught this big van loaded with weapons, and they had the guys all lied out. And right then the sandstorm starts clearing, and they couldn't see. Well, guess they didn't see that the insurgents had surrounded the post, and so the instant the sandstorm cleared, they came under fire, and the commander and the loader it's a 4-man crew. Commander and loader were out and manning these guys. They get hit, and so the driver goes out to try and help them. The gunner locks his hatch and is calling, help, all around Fallujah. Every checkpoint is, pulling up and trying to come to the rescue. The driver, he had lost his helmet on the long march out. He had put it on the top of the tank and it fell off. So he's in this gunfight, and his buddy who's wounded, he borrows his helmet, and his buddy gets shot in the head. So he had, a lot of second thoughts about that, But then it gets even worse in that we had 3 medevac birds in the area. So they fly 2 of them, to the incident. And they're trying to get them to land in the field. Well, Black Hawk pilots or any kind of helicopter pilot doesn't like landing in a field at night, because you can't tell if the ground's uneven or not, and if those blades eat dirt, you have a really bad day, So they land right on the road. Well, the cavalry's coming to the rescue along the road, So this one Bradley comes up, and he thought he'd stop the distance, but he didn't. Blade of the helicopter hits the Bradley. I don't know if you know what a Bradley is. It's like it's our vehicle that's equivalent to that. Our answer to the BMP was this Bradley. I think I have some pictures. And it's basically like a mini tank that carries infantry. The cavalry version only has like 2 guys in the back. The infantry version has like 6 dismounts in the back, In fact, here's the side of one. We'll talk a story about this one too. This one got hit by RPG, and you can see the penetration. Anyhow, so the helicopter comes apart. 2 of the helicopter guys are wounded. So the other copter takes their buddies, one with a leg laceration, whatever, leaves the soldiers there, takes their buddies. They call up the 3rd helicopter. By the time the 3rd helicopter gets there, the commander who had gotten shot in the leg, he bleeds out on the flight back. So if they had triaged it, probably he might have survived, the blood loss. So there were just, things like that. And so we had to do a debriefing of the helicopter crew. We had to do a debriefing for the guys that were there. We had to do a debriefing for the guys coming to the rescue. We separated them up, And what made my job unique, I got all 3 stories. So I had kind of an actual picture of what happened. A lot of times the commander would get a different version, if you know what I'm saying, because everybody's like, pointing fingers. So a lot of times I felt privileged that I'm one of the few that actually knew what happened in this tragedy, and that's, the story and those kind of things. I hung out a lot with this guy, partly because he kept on getting his Bradley blown up, and partly on the base, he was like one of the only other guys over 30. There's 460 guys. There's a battalion commander who looks like 32, a major who's maybe 40, chaplain maybe 40, and him and I, he was like 35 and married with kids. And so anyway, so he took me for a ride in his Bradley, and I'm up on top of the turret when I took this picture. And his Bradley, he trained it in an ambush that you just drive through, so you don't stay in the kill zone. His Bradley was out on a night patrol in Fallujah, got hit, and then hit in the transmission. So they bail out because the thing's on fire. The other Bradley does the right thing, goes on through. But then they're stuck in a crossfire, kind of trying to stay in. And one of their buddies goes, their radio man goes back in and calls, hey, come back and get us. And they're like trying to decide, should we go back and get us because we might get hit or whatever. They come back and they all pile into the Bradley and drive off. Anyways, you saw the picture of my 4-man crew. It eventually became a three-man crew.